while we were there, a coup actually happened while we were in the streets, and the coup ended up failing 2 days later. And everyone who had been protesting against this violence in general was now termed as a coup plotter. So that was the tactic that was used, was to assimilate everybody who had been protesting peacefully with this group of the military that had organized a coup. And so that was a tactic to be able to now engage in a full repression against those who had done so. So I was, a crackdown began on anybody who had been a protester or protest organizer. And so I was very much in danger, and had to be in hiding for a few days, and then had to leave the country immediately when the borders opened, which was a few days later, about 4 days later, because I knew I would have been perhaps not just arrested, but as many of the women I was with, I would probably also have been disappeared and raped, grand raped. Many of them have endured that. So I had to leave and went to the country that was closest to me, which was Rwanda, where my children were at the time. And then after a few months, I came to Canada, first to visit my sister who lived here. And as I was trying to find my way, and I kept thinking really that I would be going back, I just couldn't believe that this masquerade would continue, and ended up having to seek asylum here in Canada. So I think people flee differently. Sometimes people flee because they know that things are so bad that they will probably not be able to return soon. Yeah. When I left, it was because I knew my life was in danger, but I honestly didn't think that it would last very long. I left thinking that I would be back in a month at most. I left thinking that the situation was so outstanding and so unacceptable that there would be some form of resolution, and that I would be back. So I literally closed the door to my house and just left with a small bag, just put 2 jeans in and a couple of things, toiletries left. My children at the time were in the neighboring country, Rwanda, and closed the door and remember looking and thinking, I'm not really sure when I'm going to be back. I know I'm going to be back, but at the same time, I'm not so sure. And so I picked a picture of my daughters and as on my way out. But I really had no idea. And so the difficult part for me, which people endure when they're leaving their country, the difficult part for me was actually in seeking asylum. That's when I realized that I am now consciously making a choice, and I now know that I probably will not be home soon because I've had to seek asylum. And so that is really the most, probably one of the worst experiences of my life, because as you may know, when you seek asylum, you must surrender your passport. And that feels like surrendering your identity. It feels like you are stateless. And you feel very much in a limbo. And that's when you begin to realize that the life that you built for years and years is gone. A home filled with, your memories, your everything you've invested in for so long, including your favorite shoes, but also just everything that you have built, your friendships, your career, everything that you are just comes undone in that moment. I think the anguish that you feel as an exiled defender is that you are obviously someone who deeply, deeply cares about your country because you've been defending human rights in your country. And so there is nothing that you love more than your country and your people or the community that you were advocating for. And what exile does, and how exile has always been used as a punishment, is that it takes you away from that which is essential, which makes you you. And it puts you in a different environment where you are unknown, you are irrelevant, and you are no longer able to do that work which sustained you and means everything to you. So it's very much like a bird to whom we've cut their wings. And that is what's most difficult. And I think that's where often we don't understand the difference between refugees and human rights defenders in exile. In a ways, refugees, even though as a refugee you go through a very difficult mourning period for your country, you can somehow begin to aspire to building a new life. And there is an expectation that human rights defenders should also be doing the same. But how could you? Your work, you're not going to be a banker, you're not going to be an IT specialist, you're not going to be a doctor, this is your work. You want to be defending the rights of your people. And you are denied that right by the very virtue of being in a different country and cut out of your community, of any system. And that's why I think it's critical to be able to have structures in place that enable human rights defenders to continue their work. And when you speak about the impact, the mental impact, the impact is precisely because you are unable. It's the powerlessness. And you are affected mentally because you are unable to do what it is that is most important to you and most vital to you. That's what breaks you. It's watching what's happening in your country and being unable to do a thing about it because you have no structures in place. You don't even probably you don't even have a computer to work on. You don't have a desk in which to, with a secure connection through which you can continue connecting with your peers and working. You're now strapped in difficult circumstances, having to struggle to find food to eat and to feed your family, and taken away from those vital struggles which make you. And this is the part that I feel even in Canada, there is very little understanding on. And the expectation that you as a defender could just come in and take any other job and continue your life is absolutely ludicrous. And it is harmful to human rights defenders because it continues to deny their experience, to deny their right to do this work. Indeed, it's much more difficult to be a human rights defender when you are a woman. First of all, when you are a defender, human rights defender, you are often in a position of dissent. You're dissenting with a status quo. You're dissenting with your government. And being a dissenting voice is often not well accepted when you're a woman. Mm. So if you are a male, I noticed, for instance, that male human rights defenders in my community were very much revered, respected, even when they traveled to other countries, they would be welcomed and their communities around supporting them, there would be, but when you are a woman who's doing this work, and you would know that as feminists, then you are seen as a disruptive voice. You're the one who's never happy, the one who's always complaining. You're the other. And very soon what happens, especially when that work is not progressing, let's say you're calling for change and that change is not happening, is that your community can easily turn against you or not want to be associated with you because you are in many ways a difficult woman, because you do not comply with things as they are, with the norms of society. And so, so then it can be very isolating for you to be a human rights defender, even when you're in exile. That means that even in the diaspora, your community will not want to be too associated with you. On top of that, there are specific threats and attacks that are made on women human rights defenders. Nowadays, they tend to be digital. Many of them tend to be online. But the nature of these attacks is to ruin your persona, your reputation, your image, basically wound those very things, and that's where it's very patriarchal. So it will tend to make you look like, some of the things that we experience. For instance, there were drawings made of us by people close to the regime, of us marching naked in the streets, sort of making it. Yes, exactly, slut shaming, and so there will be, because a regime will always want to discredit you. So for men, they discredit you a certain way, but it's never slut shaming. So they will discredit you in ways that are profoundly patriarchal and that will harm you, that will harm your reputation, that will harm your family as well, and your children. So that's, again, is very wounding, and compile that with the fact that you don't have support in your community, it can be devastating, and it's very it can be very, very challenging if you don't, again, have a support system that understands that this is designed to break you. This is done on purpose to break you, and so. These are some of the experiences you go through. You'll get comments like, why can't you just take care of your children and mind your business? Why must you be always, as though you're a bad mother? You'll get such comments that are all judgments on your persona, the types of comments that male human rights defenders never get.
Yes, they don't.
They never get that. And then on top of it, you're doing this while also caring for your loved ones.
Yeah.
Whereas male defenders will have wives who do that, who take care of the home, who take care of the children. Don't forget that when you are in exile, you're dealing with children who are also dealing with exile, who are going through that pain themselves, and you have to support them. You are the support system. So you do that, you're caring for them, you must find ways to sustain them, find shelter and food for them, while at the same time keeping yourself whole and doing this work. There is no one else who does as much work as women human rights defenders, because the burdens we carry are multiple and very heavy. Unfortunately, I think this is one of the areas which still needs a lot of work. There's not enough awareness on the experiences of human rights defenders in exile here in Canada, and particularly women human rights defenders in Canada. The general idea is that you are in Canada, you are safe. And the assumption is that because you are safe from harm, you are therefore well. And the next best thing is to be able to find work, to be able to function. And that understanding of what is important to you and what builds you and what makes you is not really there. Or the threats that you face is not there. So, for instance, the way that the refugee system is designed is there is no special screening for people who come in as human rights defenders and who may face different threats. And we see that happening more and more. We see that human rights defenders who are here in Canada continue to experience threats, but there's no really mechanism to address those fully. And there is no place that you can go to. As a refugee, you know where to go to. As a human rights defender, you don't know where to go to, who to go to for that support. And so there really needs to be some coordinated approach to this, and a proper support system in place for people who come in and who are human rights defenders. And there are many of them. There are many of them who are here in Canada. So what happens is that you end up disappearing in in the landscape. And, you know, some of them end up being Uber drivers, others are probably accountants somewhere in some office. And we lose the breadth and the richness and the power of these individuals. But most of all, who wins among all these? The regimes that repress them win. And we, by failing to provide them with support systems, we are making it easier for regimes to continue to dissent and to silence their voices. And you know what? It has a ripple effect back to the countries they come from, because the other human rights defenders who are on the ground will look and say, oh, but look at this one, she was so strong, she was our leader, and look at what happened to her. So I am not going to risk my life. I'm not going to continue dissenting if this is going to be my fate. And so therefore, beyond that is that it also silences human rights defenders back home and the struggles that they come from. And that is the connection that I think is often missing in how we approach and how we understand the situation of human rights defenders in exile.